Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads that I'll be interviewing to get to those books that have impacted their life, their work, their businesses, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect. So I really want to get to that book that has really impacted who they are in every way. And I cover three categories of books in this episode, in this series. First category, where they're sharing with me a book I haven't read. The second category, where we're both covering a book we've read, whether specifically for the episode or we read it before the series even existed. The third category, is when we cover, when I have an author and or publisher come on to talk about the book in question, to give it a face, to give it a name, to give it some substance, some backstory, to really get to the meat of who they are, and where the book is coming from so that they can get that out there to the masses. And my guest today is Cleo Childs, and Cleo released her spoken word poetry album, Moving With, in May 2024. Her book, Moving With, will be released in April 2026. And these projects are the culmination of years of writing about the journey of grief she experienced after losing her mom to Alzheimer's when she was 28 years old. Her mother was an English major in college, and her grandmother, who is also one of her editors, was an English teacher for 30 years, so she came by her grief processing tool of writing naturally. With these projects, she hopes to show the path her grief took from having her mother, losing her mother, and the peace and acceptance she feels now. She also hopes to give an authentic and honest look at what her grief felt like so other people going through grief don't feel alone and feel community in their grief. You can learn more about her and her projects at cleochilds.com. Cleo, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
So I always start off, who are you today? I want to get into the work you're doing today, what that looks like, just to kind of get a sense for who it is that's going to share this book with us, just to get a little more insight into who you are today and what you're providing for others and what you're doing for yourself.
Sure. So I'm Cleo Childs. That is my pen name. My real name is Reese Zahner. You might hear myself refer to me as Reese. I'm the same person. I have a pen name because it is very practical. I grew up with Reese Zahner being mispronounced and misspelled, and it just was not a good time regarding, I always wanted my last name to be Smith or something. But,
And I only chuckle because I have had authors on here with pen names. So it's interesting. It's like, how do I refer to the person? How do I feel like we're talking about someone else behind their back. So that's the only reason I chuckle. It's because I don't know how to approach somebody or work with somebody that I don't want to be rude. So it's just an interesting process for me.
Yeah, I think that if you refer to me as Reese or Cleo or just, hey, that girl, or that one over there, I will respond to just about anything.
As long as I'm polite.
Oh, you don't even have to be polite. You could just be like, hey, and I'll be like, okay, what's up? The southernness in me will come out and I will just respond to pretty much anything.
Sounds good.
But I started off as a poet, and I was a poet that had poetry kind of thrust upon her, and the fact that it was the only way of writing that made it feel or was cohesive into what I was feeling when my mom died. So my mom got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when I was 21 years old. She passed at 28. I went into very, very deep grief. For about 6 months, I didn't talk to anyone, which is really strange for me, considering I took a test in college and they're like, you're 99% extroverted. And I was like, where'd the 1% go? And so I didn't talk to anyone for 6 months. But during that time, I started to rely on writing, but writing poetry specifically, as a way to process the emotions that were going on inside of me and to be able to take them, all these very strong emotions. I wouldn't say good or bad, because I believe just emotions are emotions. But they were very strong, and I took them, and through writing was able to take them outside of me, so I was able to have it as a processing tool. And I never intended to release my work, but I wanted to get better at it. And I went to a few classes and I talked to a few different people just because it was a hobby to me at this point. I thought I could be good. I could be awful. I had no idea. It just made me feel better. So I was like, how can I be better at this thing that I like that I may or may not be good at? But being good and being a good writer was important to me, but being good for other people wasn't. I was doing it for myself completely. And then I got inspired by songwriting, and I went to a mentorship session with a record producer in Nashville, and he said, "You're amazing." And I was like, what? This isn't on my 2024 bingo card. I was doing this for me. I had no idea if I was good because it wasn't important to me that I was good. I was trying to be honest. And he said that he would produce me. And I was like, what? So when I've watched enough like early 2000s videos or movies where they're like, if someone says that they'll produce you, that's what you're supposed to do as the main character in the movie. You're like, oh, okay, I'll do it. So I kind of relied back on like my Amanda Bynes and my She's All That kind of energy. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just, get produced. And I, through that process, realized the importance of editors. And I came across some amazing editors. So Mary Gaucher, for example, is a Grammy-nominated songwriter and artist, and she helped to edit my work. And through her edits were very specific to me. They were how to be honest and truthful in what you're writing. And she was my truth editor. So every work that we would go over, she would not edit it for technicalities or edit it to see how did it work to what was the structure of the poem like. It was, is this true and honest? And I think that was really inspiring to me. And I released the spoken word poetry album only because I thought it could help other people answer a question that I didn't have the answer to, which is when I was in deep grief, I used my intellect as a defense mechanism. And what that meant is I went and I watched anthropological videos. I read, all of these memoirs about grief. I consumed every single bit of information that I could. I bought every single grief book. And all of these books couldn't tell me the answer to the question that I had, which is, how does someone get from the depths of despair into having peace and acceptance? And what does peace and acceptance look like? Because I could see it from other people. My big person that I had like on my poster wall of grief was Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert famously has talked about this, had a horrible tragedy occur when he was a kid. And he went on later to be a comedian and to be able to laugh. And I watched the Colbert Report growing up. And I said, how can a person who I know to be a comedian and to be so funny come from a tragedy so great? I believe he lost his 2 brothers and his father in a plane crash. And I would look at that and be like, I don't understand. So when it came time to release the work, I released it because I wanted to answer the question that I didn't understand for myself, which is, how does someone go from the depths of grief into peace and acceptance, and what does peace and acceptance look like? And now that I have peace and acceptance, I wanted to go back and kind of write my story to be able to explain that question for another person and hopefully be able to give them the answer that I was also wondering, but I didn't have the answer to at the time.
So what do you think about the Stephen Colbert story, that ability to go through such tragedy and trauma, to lose family members, in his instance, lose family members, but in general, you've done so yourself. I love your comedic timing. We've had great banter back and forth. This conversation, the last conversation we had. So how do you go from, what does that look like you're not tapping into the tragedy or the trauma, but despite it being trauma, being able to move forward with such light in terms of comedy and being funny and just going through life laughing without feeling guilt, maybe? What is your best answer, I guess, today for what that dynamic is you saw, for instance, in Colbert's story? That this happens, and then how is it that he does that kind of 180 and goes the other way and is able to be like that in the face of such loss?
I think because I realize it's not a 180 and it's not in the face of such loss, it's because of such loss. And when I say that, it sounds very esoteric and, pie in the sky, but at least in my life, I think that there's 2 things that I realized about loss. 1, it can mean everything, and 2, it could mean nothing. And both are valid. In my case, it meant everything. But I think loss could mean nothing. It could just be an awful thing that happens to a person. And that's as equally valid as it being able to be something that has changed the course of your life because of it. I think that every grief and every loss is individualistic, but there are commonalities that are universal among the grief journey and the loss that people have. And I think every grief journey is valid.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But absolutely. I think that it's something where you think about people who have gone through grief and they seem to have changed because of it, which is what happened to me. And you think and you look at them and you say, oh, my grief must mean something. And initially, that's what I thought too. And I think now that I have gone through peace and acceptance, and I've thought about grief a lot, I'm a thinker, it could as equally be valid if it means nothing. And I think that that's something where, for me, it meant something. But it doesn't have to mean anything. It could just be something that happens to a person. I think for me, I took it to mean something because I had to. And the fact that when I say that, what I mean is, I changed because of the events that happened to me involuntarily. It was not something that I was actually aware of, saying this grief is going to change me. And I changed because of it. And it was a conscious process. It was an unconscious process. And I realized over time that I have changed when I look at who I was before grief and who I am after. I think I look at Colbert and I don't know. It's he hasn't told me. I haven't spoken to him. I've just seen and I think too, it's this idea.
And I just meant, what did you find in your journey, having looked at his experience from the outside and just been like, how does he do that? So, and you explained it beautifully, the way that you look at it. So
I think, I don't know, but it does touch you in a way because it becomes like an imprint to your life. It imprints you. Now the question is, does it matter? Does it change you as a person or not? It is, regardless of that, it is an imprint. For me, and what I imagine maybe for Colbert, is it made me more gracious and made me have much more appreciation for everything around me because I understood what loss was.
Yeah.
And in loss, I had gratitude. And in gratitude, everything became brighter somehow because I now had contrast to that. Beforehand, I didn't have contrast. I'd never really experienced loss of someone very close to me. And I didn't understand that you could be able to have such joy and experience the extremes of emotions. I unlocked the ability to have joy in my life because I unlocked the ability to have sorrow. I think beforehand I lived on a spectrum where my emotions were happy, sad. And then once I had grief, I was able to, I had such deep sorrow that it unlocked me to have such deep gratitude and joy for the world and for my life. But it was only because of going to one extreme that I was able to unlock the other extreme. I think that also I learned how to integrate my mother with me in moving with the journey. So I never moved on from it. I say that I was grieving and now I'm in mourning. And I will be in mourning for the rest of my life over my mother, but I am no longer in the intense grief that I had after she passed, but I am still in mourning because it will always be an imprint on my life. Yeah. And it will always be something that is now a hole that I have to deal with for the rest of my life. So, for example, I know for a fact, like my husband and I are talking about having children, and it will hurt me when everyone else can say, oh, my mother came to my baby shower, and oh, I could ask my mom, and my mom held my child. Yeah. I know for a fact that I will not have that. That is not what my journey looks like. And that will hurt me, and I will probably go back and I will be brought up with feelings of grief for my mother. And it's this thing where I learned how to be able to navigate with my mother's death, and I don't live in reaction to it. I just live as a part of navigation with it. And that's why I called the book and the album Moving With, because you never move on from grief, you just learn how to move with it. And I think also it's not necessarily something that is a conscious decision of I'm going to move with it. You just, as human nature, time presses. I wrote in a poem one time that time presses begrudgingly, forcing me to continue moving, to think I'm immune as folly, believing I am as human. Time presses, things happen, it doesn't hurt as much, and it's not something that you can really control to the same degree as life just happens to you, and time happens to you, and the pain, as intense as it is, subsides kind of like a third-degree burn. or anything, or any wound that heals on your body. I think there's a wound that heals on your soul and you have the scar of it.
Yeah.
But it just becomes an imprint.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just thinking about all the conversations about grief that I've had recently, have seen online, have read about online. I listened to a podcast yesterday a friend of mine recommended. It was on Diary of a CEO. The guest was Mo Gadat, I believe is his name. And he had spoken about how his son was supposed to go in for a surgery. It was like a 5-minute routine surgery that lasted 4 hours. He eventually lost his son. I highly recommend the conversation just because I love hearing different aspects and approaches to how people grieve, how they view it. But it was interesting hearing his take. And then my dad passed away in 2020, and I'm not making light of anything in bringing this up, but a friend of mine lost her dog, and she was broken. One of my best friends. And we finally go out to lunch and we see each other, and you could tell like she's just broken. And I felt bad because I told her too, I'm like, you're grieving more for I feel bad. I feel like a shitty son because I didn't even grieve this much for my dad. I found out he died. The tears came instantly, and then it just kind of stopped. And there were no more tears after that. And it's much to like, in thinking about it, that conversation with her was maybe 2021, 2022. And since that time, I've started this podcast, and I realized that my grieving, the way it looks, it wasn't, I thought I was supposed to be ugly crying for months. But my grieving, my process was, I did that. I got that energy out of my system, that loss. And my dad's with me every day, every time I do this podcast. Because this was his approach to life, was talking to people, talking to strangers, seeing what he could come up with them. He loved a good laugh. He loved food. He loved music. He loved laughing. He loved dancing, all of that stuff. So now I find more love, and I find more grounded in all of those things. I always enjoyed that. I realized how much of my dad I am after he passed, and I really got to thinking what he meant to me. So it's just amazing how that grieving process does look different for other people. So for me, that moving with it is just celebrating now and realizing consciously that this whole thing, everything I do as a coach, is because of him and his example. Moving through that forward is just incredible, because every day that I have these conversations or coach people, whatever it may be, it's all celebration of who he was. That's my, I don't know what you would call it at this point, and everybody can have their own vernacular, the way they approach it, but that's my living and moving with my father. Is just everything that I do that is reaching out to people, is being human to people, is laughing with people. All that humanity comes from him, so that's my celebration with him on an ongoing basis.
And can I read you something from the book?
Sure.
Which is my kind of version of what it means to move with someone. So this is called She Pours In, and this is one of the first things I wrote when I was in grief. It wasn't the first, but it was relatively early on. And it says, physics says energy is neither created nor destroyed. I believe my mother follows the same rules. She is lost in body, but I find her spirit inhabiting those around me. I am grateful for her kindness when it is given. I appreciate her gentleness when I am treated gently. I admire her courage when I watch others be courageous. When I open myself to her, she pours in. My mother grants me an audience every time I catch my reflection. She escapes through my eyes, their shade reminiscent of the magnolia tree she planted. Her laughter hibernates in my throat, dormant until she is entertained. She leaks from my fingertips, a tap of wisdom I welcome to overflow on my page. She sings along to John Denver, though she forgets the words. During her passing, she molded me, shaping me into her earthly vessel. I am her legacy, the incarnation of her life's work, her representative to life.
Yeah. That's the way I view it. So I don't know, as a kid, my sister and I would have these moments we talk about losing our parents, and it would kill us. like thinking about them not being there. And as adults, thinking about it the same way, you know, my dad was in bad shape. Okay, we need to kind of think about the future. And you always thought about it as they were gone and you couldn't hold them, you couldn't love them, they couldn't hold you, you couldn't feel their warmth. So then that was over. As a kid, that's the way that I would think about it. Even maybe an early adult. And obviously, the way I just expressed it to you, the way you shared it from your passage that you read, that's the way that I view it now. That's the way I feel it now. And it's incredible how different people view it differently. But everybody has their own process. So thank you for sharing that passage.
Yeah. I think that, as I said, every grief journey is individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
Every grief is individual. But I think that there are commonalities and universalities within the grief journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderfully comforting. I think also I am a humanist, I think, above all. I love humanity. And I feel connected in this way to others when I understand that they have had a loss, a deep loss, or a loss similar to mine. Because I feel like there's an understanding that is like an unspoken understanding of loss.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me is so interesting because it is a commonality with another person due to a circumstance. And you understand that they have been through something, that you have been through something which is different from yours, but also incredibly similar. And I find it connects me to humanity. And when I went through, and one of the very first things I wrote when I was in grief is I was trying to figure out what is the purpose of suffering. I did not know. I knew I was suffering. And I wrote a poem with it was just a question. What is the purpose of suffering? And I came to the conclusion about halfway through the poem, which is my thesis on why do people suffer, right? This is just mine.
Mm-hmm.
But it brought me intense relief and camaraderie with others because my thesis was suffering turns disparate sailors into unified crewmen. It is a great connector. I think suffering more than anything else because we all suffer in a way. And through suffering, I feel more connected to others. And we all suffer, and I feel immensely connected to everyone because of that. And the suffering looks different, but the suffering's still there. And it also allows me to have really open and honest conversations about what that looks like if they're willing to have it. And through that, I'm connected to my humanity. And that makes me, I have gratitude for being able to have conversations. And that makes me gratitude. I have gratitude for the suffering because that allows me to be able to connect to other people. And through that, I feel not alone. And I think connection is the antidote to loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a world of, we have an epidemic of loneliness right now, like the CDC says that we do. And I think by having open and honest conversations about the really hard in life, that actually is an antidote to me feeling alone in my experiences. And it makes me feel more connected to humanity. And I'm just so grateful sometimes. I can hold two truths at one time, which is that I would never want my mother to die. And in a way, because of her death, I have more gratitude than I ever did beforehand, which is a positive.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. In a different conversation earlier, or last week, my guest spoke about somebody that died in her life, and she had apologized in the moment. I'm sorry to bring this to something so morbid. But much like what you stated just now, and you have in the last couple minutes, and that I see is kind of, if it happens, we didn't want it to happen. We wouldn't want it to happen if we had control. But because it has happened, it does open up a doorway to a different kind of being for yourself. She said the same thing in the passing of her husband. It kind of launched her into a different kind of humanity and into looking at the power of community, appreciating the power of community. So everything that is adverse, everything that is an obstacle, a challenge, a loss, again, would we want to go through it again? No. Would we want to have this person back with us, specifically to the cases we're talking about? Of course. But it is powerful that we're able to draw, both you and I, greater humanity, seeing greater humanity, seeing the greater impact that we can have that maybe before we didn't. I know I didn't realize it. I was nice to people. I did for people. The weird thing is, nothing has really changed in my actions, but the energy that I bring to those actions is intensified, is amplified, whether it's a conversation with a friend, looking at them more, asking them more, really being in the moment with them, whether it's a guest on this podcast, reaching in and really getting to know my fellow human beings. So that's the craziest part with me is like nothing in my habits has changed, but my presence in each of them and what I bring to them and what I want to share with other people, that has been enhanced.
I think that it's really interesting to me is there was a thought experiment that I could not understand for the life of me. And I thought about it a lot, and I just didn't understand it. And I understand it now. So, there was a thought experiment that said people would, the thought experiment was, if you had a machine that you could step into, okay, and you would start at the beginning, and you had the perfect life. There is the perfect life. Everything would go your way, and you would die happy and everything would be perfect. And you would have no idea that you were in the machine, but you knew that you would step into the machine. Okay. Would you go in the machine? And would you have this perfect life that you have no idea about once you're in it? I could not understand why everyone said no, that they would not go into the perfect life. Everyone said no. I couldn't understand it. I said, what do you mean? We want to have the perfect life. I understand completely after loss why they said no. And I think it's interesting is my reason of what do I want at the end of my life completely changed. So before loss, what I wanted at the end of my life was to have a good life, was to just have a good life, have a good husband, have a good family and be happy. That's no longer what I want at the end of my life. After loss, what I want at the end of my life is to be the most human possible. I want to be the most human I can. And that means embracing, or not embracing, but understanding that suffering happens and understanding that I don't want it, but I would not give up suffering at the same time. I think what I learned in grief is how to hold two truths at one time, that there are things that are not binary, yes and no. And I think I thought of life binary, quite honestly. Everything kind of fit into one bucket. It was like yes or no, ones and zeros. And then once mom died, I went into intense grief, and I went through that, and now I'm moving with grief, and moving with my mother, and living with life. Is I think of things as being able to be valid in multiple forms. I can be able to hold two truths at one time and recognize both are valid, though they seem contradictory to themselves. And I think that's unlocked my ability to be a more full human, and also not to limit myself in how I think and how I feel. In the beforehand, I would be very limited in my thinking and my feeling because I said, well, I can't feel this because of this. It's like an if-then statement. Now it's an and statement. I can feel this and this, and I can understand that both are valid. But my thinking only changed after loss, which is so interesting to me. I don't know how you feel, but.
Yeah, I think if you stepped into that machine for the perfect life and say it reset your memory and you were living the perfect life in there, I wouldn't step in there. For John on the outside, I wouldn't step in there. If you said as soon as you step in and it starts, you'll have no recollection of anything else. It'll be as if you always had the perfect life. That's my and. I wouldn't want to go in for myself knowing what I know, but if you can erase my memory and start from the beginning that way, and there's no idea of, the yin and yang, there's no idea of the opposite, that's all I know, fine. I see the advantage to being on the outside, where you get a little taste of the bad with the good, the yin and yang, little taste of the good with the bad, because it balances out, it gives you perspective, but the memory would need to be wiped, because if you go forward perfect, but you have this recollection of what suffering was, and it's always perfect, you have no challenges, you have no obstacles, everything comes to you easy. I think certain muscles in your body and your mind are just going to atrophy because they don't have any kind of tension. They don't have any kind of obstacles to come up against. I think I'm one of those people that subscribes to the fact that you need tension in your life. And you just can't coast, or everything that we've evolved to be in our emotions, in our mind, in our bodies would just atrophy, because you need that constant, not hard, but every once in a while, something to kind of reset you and sometimes put you back in your place. So if I had the prior knowledge of my life, I wouldn't want to go in there and remember those memories. Because again, it's that, like you said, the contrast, it's the reference points. So it's all about those reference points that helps you appreciate one side versus the other. That's a great experiment, a question to have, though.
I think for me, I have these moments where I've had them beforehand in like work and with a really hard test and all this stuff. And I would say I would call them very specifically starting around my early 20s. I would say I'm in a perspective giving moment. And that's how I looked at the hard. I would say I'm in a perspective giving moment. And I would go and I would say, on the other side of this, because it will not last forever, I will have learned something and I will have gained new perspective because I've gone through this. And that's what I say when I'm in the moment of the really hard thing. I say I'm in a perspective giving moment. And what I've found is that usually what I gain is gratitude. That is the perspective, is I have more gratitude because I went through the hard.
Yes.
Now that I'm on the other side. Like, I had a horrible boss, and I would go in and I'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to go to work today. I don't want to do it. And I would say, I'm in a perspective giving moment. I'm going to learn something from this, and I will have a better perspective because I've been through this thing. And then I had a great boss, and I was so grateful for this great boss because I knew what the opposite looked like.
Yeah,
I had contrast in my life. And so whenever I go through something really difficult and I'm in it, I just keep I wake up and I go, I know this is hard, and I'm going to have a new perspective from this because it will not last, and most likely I will have gratitude on the other side. And I think that that's how I kind of deal with these. I literally go and I say I'm in a perspective giving moment, and I will gain a new perspective, and most likely that will be gratitude.
Yeah. The majority of the conversations I've had on here, the people that I have on, the guests that I have on, whether they're authors or they're sharing a book, somebody else's book, author or not, the work that they're doing is what they feel drawn to. It's what they feel just comes from them. It's what they're meant to do. It's their thing. They feel so passionate about it. And most of them have gone through shit in some capacity, in some form. Most of them through childhood, through their upbringing. It was just something that stood out, whether it was traumatic, big T, little t, disruption, atypical, whatever it might be, however you want to look at it. And all of them, I asked them, would you change those things? And again, like I said before, if they had the choice, would they want to go through it? If they could choose to go through it or not, again, no, they wouldn't. But now that they've gone through that, now that they've had that experience, it's the driver of their work, whether they're giving other people what they didn't get as a child, or whether they're building off the legacy of a parent or a friend or whoever they may have lost. So it's just incredible how much can come out of all of that there is. It amplifies your life if you want to if you have time, if you're capable of seeing that lesson, what is really there. And it just shows you how beautiful life is. And I love the word that you keep bringing up, is that gratitude that you have. When you get a taste for that, the bitter, when you're stuck in the tough moments, It gives you perspective so that you're grateful for what you do have later. It's this kind of oscillation between those environments and those energies.
I think that for me, and I think that this might apply to people as well, I'm not sure, but for me, I want to try to ease the path of others who have gone through something, and that's all you can try to do. I think everyone's going on their own journey, right? So like with writing the book, I wanted to answer a question I didn't have the answer to. And I think that I can't take away someone's pain, and it's not my journey to walk on if they're going through grief and they understand and they're reading this and they say I identify with this because I'm in grief. But I think that my goal is not to take away pain. My goal is not to walk the path for them, because I think that's impossible. You can't do that. But I think what I can try to do is to ease the path that someone is on as someone who's walked it beforehand. And I think that that is something probably that a lot of people who have been through something difficult is they go behind and they say, how can I help to ease the path of other people who are following me? And I don't try to change it. I don't try to take it away, but I try my best to be able to make it a little bit easier, because I know what it's like and I have the compassion and I have the ability to try to do that thing.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about humanity before. The suffering, that's what we have in common. You can guarantee we have that in common. Yes, we go through society together. Some of us may look alike, dress alike, talk the same language. But ultimately, when it comes to who you are, your heart, suffering, loss, that's like one of the major things we have in common. And like anything else, you spoke about loneliness, like anything else. For instance, me with my anxiety that I've always had, one of the best things that's helped me is talking to other people with it, because the worst part of that anxiety was feeling like I was alone, was feeling like I was the only one experiencing it or couldn't handle it. So again, you have the respect for their process, that you won't be able to take that pain away, that you won't be able to shorten their period of grief or mourning wherever they may fall. But the fact that they know that somebody's out there that feels that pain, because I remember when certain people died when I was younger, and they would die, you'd hear the news, or you'd be at the wake, or you'd be at the funeral, and then you'd step out of the church or the cemetery, wherever you are, and the world was still going on around you. And in my young mind, I'm like, don't they know this person has died? Why is the world still going on with this huge loss that we've had? All that to say is that helps somebody. The way that you write, the way that you share your experiences helps somebody feel seen. And again, we're all going to feel different ways, but just it gives somebody company just in knowing that somebody could have been in those depths to where they feel lost, lonely. Again, you lose a family member, maybe most of the family has already not moved on, but they're in a better place, where maybe one person just feels lost. They feel like they have no direction without that person that they've lost. And reading your work can kind of just remind somebody that even in loss, there's humanity. I may not know who you lost, but the way that I write about my experience may help you so that you don't feel so lonely. To me, it always seems like that's the worst part, is feeling like you're the only one that feels that pain or loss.
Well, and I think Brene Brown said that the antidote to loneliness is vulnerability and connection. And sometimes you have to be the first person to take that step. And it's like, for me, I am releasing the book and I released the album with no intention with the hope that it could touch someone and that it made them feel less alone. But I can't control that. All I think, and also, it was really important to me, like I mentioned beforehand with Mary Gaucher, is I was honest and truthful about what grief felt like. And I didn't bullshit people, because I believe that when you go through grief, at least I did, is I immediately gained this bullshit meter where I could tell if someone was lying to me and was giving me falsities immediately. Like, it became like a superpower. And so it was really important to me as I was writing the book to have every word be looked at to make sure it was honest and truthful. And Mary would call me out and she would say, is this the right word for this? Is this really what you felt like? This doesn't seem, she had like an amazing like radar. So every word we went through is to make, and doing that is I became more okay with, or I became a better communicator with myself about what was actually happening, because I knew that I was doing that for other people because I didn't want to lie to people in grief. And I didn't want to say, and I also didn't want to cover up the bad parts. Like I talk about how I became dependent on alcohol when I was going through grief. It was like a coping mechanism. I didn't make a big deal of it, but it's in the book, and it's something that happened. Now, is it something that I could say, I could admit to make myself look better? Sure. But is that honestly what happened? And by putting it in there, does someone else who's maybe going through the same thing, do they feel not so alone in doing that? And is that the better thing? Is that the thing that I would rather do than try to make myself look good, is to be honest? I think it comes down to like, what is the perspective of the work that you're writing? And I think that you have the work that I am touched by, the work that touches me, is one where the person is really confident in their message and they release all the ego of making themselves look cool, and they get to the fact of humanity, and that shows showing the fact that people are infallible, or they're fallible, and not showing that they are perfect. Because I think perfection and ego is the antithesis of connection and vulnerability. And that means being okay with yourself by saying, I am human and I have faults, and showing those, and not trying to say, I am better than anyone, or look at me, look how great I am. It's saying, look how flawed I am. Yeah. Look how similar I am to you. And showing that vulnerability is how you decrease loneliness. Yeah. And I think that takes a certain level of being okay with people looking at you and seeing your flaws. Like, I know that if people read the book, they'll be like, oh, she became dependent on alcohol. And I have to be okay with that and be like, yes, I did. And not chastising myself for it, because I understand how I got there. And it's embracing one's own humanity. When I think it's really interesting is in society today, with Instagram and with social media, we are putting on facades that we are these like not flawed people. We don't have flaws. We are all perfect. We're showing the best of ourselves. And by doing that, we're actually taking away the humanity within ourselves, and we're not allowing for connection because there's nothing to connect to. Yeah. How can I connect to someone that's like a Greek god that has which, the Greek gods were actually, so that's not a good analogy, but someone who's like, they were definitely flawed. I mean, you look at Zeus and what he did. But my point, of like this like infallible, this perfect person. And I go, I can't connect to you. It's through, I think, our flaws that allow us to be able to connect to another person, because you're like, oh, you're flawed, I'm flawed, and maybe our flaws are what we have in common.
And those I appreciate when somebody speaks up and shares about themselves, just because you're starting, depending on how deep the conversation is. You and I always talk for a couple hours, but I don't want it to be performative when I'm doing it. It's just, this is where I really stand right here. I'm flawed. I'm pulling back the curtain, and I do that just because I want us to start on a solid foundation. So I don't want to start from a facade, if you will, of everything's perfect, everything's rolling out nice, like, the podcast is moving along. And I don't know, I just think after a while, just that honesty. Again, I've shared some shit on this podcast that I've never shared with friends. It wasn't because I didn't trust them, but the conversation that I was having here went a certain way. That person was being a little honest, that I was being honest, that we kind of opened up, and it just went on and on. And it's just who we are. that's as simply as you can put it. It's just, you know where you stand if we're just honest about each other. And instead of using energy to keep up this perfect or perfect-ish facade, you can now, instead of using that energy to hold that up, you can use that energy to really express who you are, be honest about yourself. Because for me, just as an example with the anxiety I spoke about, most of my energy was used to kind of keep the facade up, to keep it like I was in control. And then once I was able to just kind of tell the truth and say where I stood, it was a breath of fresh air. And that energy that I used to kind of keep all the plates spinning on the sticks or whatever went towards really building up who I was. So again, there's just that commonality of showing what we're going through. And it doesn't happen that often. Every chance I can, if there's a moment, again, I don't want it to be performative, but if there's a moment that I could admit or be vulnerable about something that I'm not sure of, I like to do that just because it kind of hopefully invites others to open up as well. But, you know, I'm a work in progress. I'm not going to nail it every time. I'm comfortable with that. And it allows me to be a little more free if I can just admit, no, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But I'm working in a direction of building up who I am and what I want to create.
Letting go of this idea of perfectionism. I'm talking as a recovering perfectionist, right? So like, for example, when Mom got diagnosed when I was 21, I didn't tell anybody because I was holding on this idea that my life was perfect. And I'm like, wait, my mom has Alzheimer's. I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to so badly have it not be true. And I was like, the second that I start to admit it to myself, and I would go to fraternity parties. I didn't go to Georgia Tech. My cousins did, and my friends did. And I was like this, I tried to be like this thing called like the cool girl. I was in my early 20s. It's like cool girls drink whiskey. I hate whiskey. But I was like, but cool girls drink whiskey. So I'm going to drink whiskey because I want to be this cool girl. And it was like all this performative act of trying to say who I wanted to be rather than who I was. And I didn't tell the people that could actually help to like bring me into community and support me, this thing that was happening, because it didn't fit into like this realm of what I thought was perfect for a college student. So I didn't tell anyone. And by doing that, I really actually hurt myself by not being able to lean on community and the people that would support me by trying to say that I was cool and perfect and being very performative. But I think I wasn't emotionally mature enough to be able to have enough security within myself to say I am imperfect. I think that takes a lot of security within oneself to admit the imperfections that one has and to be open about that. And that takes a lot of thinking and growth. And some people maybe have it immediately, like they're brought up and they're like, they got that. I was not that person. I kicked and screamed to imperfections, and I was like, I would cover them up. Like I was like an asbestos ceiling, and I was like, let me just go put some nice wallpaper on this, and let me go get like some cardboard from, I don't know how buildings work. Well, let me go get like some shit from like the Home Depot and put this up, and I'm really an asbestos ceiling. Let me go, like, hopefully you won't do some chemical test over here, but. And I would be like, look at me. It's like one of those like fixer-up houses where you see them on the internet where they're like, oh, the floor's slanted, everything doesn't work, but it looks great. And then they don't get a home inspection. And then you're like, oh, everything's broken. Like, I am that broken home. That's what, I haven't even watched HGTV recently, so this analogy is coming out of like left field for me. But I think that it took a while. And actually, like, Mom dying, like, took me the ability, I became so free to be so ragingly apathetic about life. Like, Mom dying allowed me to become so free about the fact that I no longer had to perform because I didn't have the energy to perform anymore. So I became, like, this raging apathetic person. And then I started doing this random, because I had no energy to, like, make up, like, the performance of it. Mm-hmm. People would, like, ask me how I'm doing, and I'd be like, it's shit. My mom died. I'm not doing well. And they're like, oh, okay, you want to talk to me about that? So by actually being honest for the first time, due to raging apathy, because I had no energy to put up a performance, I built community.
There's something about the phoenix rising from the ashes. There's just something to that. When, so it came up in a conversation I had on here a couple weeks ago where it's like, when you're finally broken and you have nothing, it's like the bottom is the perfect place to build your castle. Again, you're not creating a facade, a fake structure to appease others or to save face. I grew up with my mom always saying, what will others think? What will other people say? And I grew up like thinking that way until a certain point where it's just kind of like, they're not paying my fucking bills. Like, you're professional, you do a good job, you want to draw people in with your story, whether for your business as a person, this or that, but what will other people say? Just that concern really ate at me. And I think obviously it lent itself to my anxiety throughout life, and I'm coming out of that, but it gives me a new appreciation for the power of the story that you can tell, what you can put out there instead of just worrying what other people see from the outside, because no one's keeping fucking score. Who's keeping score? No one's keeping score. You kind of grow up thinking that people are keeping. If somebody, for me, I see on Facebook all the time, people are talking crap about me, or people are this, or people are that. Well, who are you giving credence to? Who are you giving credit to? You're the one giving away that power to these people, whoever they may be. So we're jumping into all different topics, but it all applies in terms of your humanity, what you put out there, and what you learn from what you experience.
I think I love jumping into different topics. I have ADHD.
I know.
This is like my jam.
I know.
This is my brain's happy place. I'm also like a big thinker, and I love philosophy. So I'm over here being like, let's talk about humanity. So I think, but I think, so also like, for example, I'm in the process of writing my first ever novel, which is really interesting because it's different from a memoir. And what I'm doing is I am very, very careful about the fact that I am writing with a question, not an answer. I think that I'm going and using the novel to explore a question that I have, which is, what does it mean to be a proud Southerner? Because I'm from Georgia and I don't know the answer. I don't know if I will have an answer at the end of it, right? But I think it's an interesting question, and I have about 5 different questions that I want to ask. So I want to write about 5 different books to explore my humanity and through and questions that I think are important that I don't know the answer to. But by going in with not an answer, I think it frees me to be able to have more understanding and to be able to come to a deeper conclusion, because I might not ever reach the answer, but it is an exploration. So you're talking like all over the board, like that is my freaking jam. Like I love it. I'm like, let's go where the interesting thing is. Which my husband's like, can we go from point A to point B? I'm like, but haven't you seen the interesting side thing on the side of the road? Like, he's like, we've gotten into a lot of places where I get really angry. Because I'm like, there was a giant, like, the world's largest ball of yarn or something. I was like, I want to go see that. He's like, but we have a 12-hour car ride. We need to go to Atlanta. And I'm like, but the world's largest ball of yarn, we can't just leave that. So I appreciate you going on my tangents with me.
I love tangents. You, in terms of writing that book, if you come at it with an answer, it's like, okay, starting point, answer. Yeah. Versus starting point and exploring. I mean, I'd be curious, your writing process, I'd be curious for that book, that first book when you come out with it, what you will have learned by exploring instead of coming at it with a ready and prepared response where you already know the answer, you're just going to give it some meat and that's it, versus here's the question, let me go out and explore or interview people in my community, in my inner circles, whoever it may be. So it just opens it up, like you said. You keep an open mind. You're not locked into one response, that's the structure. You'll bring a different flavor to it that maybe no one else has.
Well, and I think, like, for example, the third book that I have, it's all about my mom. So one of the questions I have is, the question I have, which I don't know how I'm going to answer, and that's not even answering. I don't know how I'm going to go exploring. It's kind of like going exploring is the way that I see it. Is it kindness, or is it what is it? Is it a strength, or is it a weakness? or is it a false idea to be kind in a cruel world?
Oof.
I don't know the answer. My mother was incredibly kind in a cruel world. Did that make her strong? Was that a strength of hers? Was that a weakness of hers? Or was it just a false wish of hers? I don't know the answer. But I know that it's worth exploring to me because I find it incredibly interesting. And so I think it's like figuring out as a writer, for me, it's for me like writing novels, but also when I think about writing a memoir, it's how it's going exploring by trying to answer an unanswerable question. That's the interesting part to me.
Yeah.
And how can you be able to explore through characters and through settings and through situations and through conflicts a question that I think is worth exploring that probably has no answer, but it's worth asking regardless of the fact that it has no answer.
Yeah. Doesn't have a clean answer. It's not linear. So your path there isn't going to look like this. It's just going to be like zigzagging in every direction. Reese, so when it comes to you, how do you reconcile your childhood to the work that you're doing today? What is it about the child that you were that shows up in the work you do today, who you are today, who you are in your work, your community, your business, whatever it may be? How do you reconcile the two?
When I was a child, I was very curious and precocious. I was someone who loved secrets. I loved secrets, so much so that I did a lot of things that I'm not proud of. Like, for example, I found my mom's diaries and I read them when I was in the 5th grade, and I found out a lot of stuff I shouldn't have found out because they were private diaries and I'm an idiot. And like, I shouldn't have done that. But I was so big on finding information that I wanted to learn everything. Like, I read all of the Chicken Soup for the Souls. I'm not saying I read one Chicken Soup for the Soul. I read the entire series, basically, of Chicken Soup for the Souls by the 6th grade. I think I've always been this person who loves philosophy. I love thinking. I love thinking of questions that have no answer, but they're worth thinking about for the sole reason that they're important questions. It's figuring out, I think I've never lost this curiosity of what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human? Is humanity a great thing or a parasite? Are we, and I go back and forth constantly on it. I think I'm a humanist. I've always been a humanist. I've loved people. Even apparently, like, since I was a kid, when I was an infant, I would catch people's eyes and start waving at them, and I wouldn't and then if they didn't wave back at me, I would cry. Right? So I've always had like this ability to connect to people, and I've always had this desire to since I was an infant. And I think that's grown in my writing because I am trying to connect to people and I can't control if it connects. I think that's the interesting thing, but you write it regardless. It might not be meaningful for a single person, but it's meaningful for me, and thus it has value, and it is valid.
Absolutely.
The great thing is that I know that it has meaning because I've done a lot of beta reads, and the book, it's brought people to tears. It's only 14,000 words. It's very short, which I intentionally wanted it to be short because I wanted someone to read it in one sitting and to go through the emotional journey of having my mother losing her, grief, and peace and acceptance. I wanted it to be able to be done in one sitting. So it's incredibly short intentionally. And people have cried. Some people told me they had to stop and put it away because it was so intense, the emotions that they were feeling, that they couldn't pick it up again and they had to start the next day, which to me is so interesting considering it's so short. Right? And it's a series of vignettes. And it's not even chapters. It's little vignettes of little moments and in poems. But it is honest and it is raw. And to me, it has meaning. Because I think for me, I look back on it and I'm like, did it accurately capture my grief? Yes.
So are you talking about Moving With, or are you talking about this other book? Okay.
The novel no one has read, Moving With.
Okay.
The novel is a work in progress. I'm only halfway through it. But Moving With is finished. It's a finished book. Yep. And it's 14,000 words. The novel will be much longer. But people have had to stop it. And people have thanked me for writing it. Someone thanked me for my gift of writing that has allowed them to read the cathartic experience. And I was like, what? I didn't, and someone else said, but the most important ones are the ones where you say, I lost someone, and your writing didn't make me feel so alone. I mean, I could cry thinking about it.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I meant.
I could cry thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you do it. I think that's why the things that matter to me, and I wrote it without the knowledge it could be meaningful to someone else. I wrote it because it was meaningful to me, and in the hope it could be meaningful to others. I also know, for example, if people are going to have an issue with it, I know exactly what those issues are. So, for example, in the book, I very particularly and specifically mention my sister and my dad little. I mention them that they existed, but I don't mention my relationship with them. That's because that's not the story that I was wanting to tell. It also wasn't, I wanted to respect their privacy. I wanted to put a boundary around what is the story that I'm telling. I will tell you my grief, but I didn't want it to go and tell you my sister's grief or my father's grief. I didn't want to, or my relationship with them and how my grief impacted them and what that relationship was. And people ask me for it. And they say, I really wanted to know more about your relationship with your sister and your dad. I'm not willing to tell that to people. So it's like also putting a boundary around the memoir of what am I willing to tell and what am I not. And accepting the fact that people want to know information that I'm not willing to give. And how can I, and so I know, because enough people have said to me, what happened to your sister, what happened to your dad? And I'm like, I'm not telling you because it's not my story to tell.
Yeah.
So I know like where people could get frustrated with it because it's very particular about what story I'm telling, because it's not I don't want to veer into lanes that are not mine, into stories that are not mine. I want to share, and it's also what am I willing to share and how much am I willing to share of myself and where am I willing to share of myself. That's also a consideration when it comes to a memoir. I think it's not a tell-all. It is a very curated, specific point of my life that I'm willing to share with you, as fully and honestly as I am. But it doesn't mean that you get my whole life. You don't get my whole grief journey. You get what I'm willing to share. I think that there's a lot of, and with some memoirs, I feel like some people go in and they say, I'm going to share everything about this experience, which is fine. It's fine. That's not the way I'm doing it. I'm doing it, what am I willing to share? What do I feel, and what am I open to sharing? And you may want more, but I'm not willing to give you more. How do I put boundaries upon my own work? And how do I respect people's wanting more, but how do I say, I'm not willing to give you more? And know that, and also there's certain things that, for example, that would make the book more meaningful that I'm not willing to give. For example, I write a lot of voicemails. I do transcripts of voicemails in my memoir so that people can understand what my mother was going through and watch her deterioration. I do transcripts. Those transcripts are actual transcripts from the voicemails I have with my mother. I know that it could be meaningful for someone to hear my mother's voice on the transcripts.
Yeah.
But it's my mother's voice. It's mine.
Yeah. I mean, some things are sacred.
Exactly. But I think that there's like a delineation that I had to put in about what am I holding back for myself. And I think that there is a mentality that I had to very, very consciously curate at the beginning of it as to what am I willing to show and what do I keep private and and what would be beneficial for the book, but what do I keep to myself because it's more important to retain. Like there's a letter that I did a transcript of. I'll let you see what she wrote, but her handwriting is mine. You don't get my mother's handwriting. You can get the message, right? But her handwriting's mine. Her voice is mine. I think that I was very clear about that from the very get-go because I wanted it to be something that I could stand on and make it meaningful for others. Meaningful for myself first, right? Then meaningful for others, but also invite them into a home with the rooms that I want them to see and keep things that are private for me and I don't allow access to. even though I know that they would probably want access to them.
Yeah, I think every author has to determine what is for the public, what is for me. Reese, for you, what did your writing career, even in learning in school, what did your journey into your writing, what did that look like? You were curious, you asked a lot of questions, you liked keeping secrets. Were you writing at that same age that you were going through your mom's diaries? Did writing come later? What does that path of writing look like for you?
I was a vivacious reader. I loved reading. I had a book closet. I was very grateful to have a closet just for books, and I filled it to the brim, and I read everything. I read the classics. My grandmother was an English teacher, as I said, it was actually 33 years. I missaid 30 because it's just easier to say 30, but it's 33 years. And she has more than a master's in English. And so growing up, she would give me like thesauruses, and she would make me memorize poems, and she would give me, reading assignments that I would have to do. And I basically had like an English teacher I had an English teacher as a grandma, but I also had a mentor in English. My mother was an English major from the University of Georgia. So my mother was also very big into reading. And I never wrote, except for like, password. Remember like password keepers, these like awful machines where you had to like you would have to give a password into this machine. You would have to say it one way and then figure out a way to repeat exactly the voice inflection in this machine that could not hear worth a damn. And then you would have to go and like get like a piece of, either a hammer, or like you would have to jerry rig this machine open to figure out what the hell you were actually writing in your password keeper. Maybe some other people got into their password keepers very easily. I don't know. I was all over the place, obviously, because I have ADHD, and I was a very like gregarious kid. So like my inflection was, all over the goddamn place. So I probably could, I did not have like this monosyllabic, monotone of voice to get into my password keeper. So like I would write like little things like that. And then I was really good at research paper writing. So that's only because Grandma and I were like a little machine. We were like the machine that could. So I would, in college, write a draft. Then I would send it to my grandma. She would redline it. She would print it off, redline it, send it back to me. Then I go to my English teacher. She would redline grandma's edits and then send it back to me. Then I go to grandma. Then I used to go to my English teacher, and then I would turn it in. I did this, and I didn't have to take a second year of English, or a second semester of English my freshman year, but I did it anyway, because I wanted to get better at writing research papers. At the end of my senior year, I was a killer research paper writer. I loved writing research papers. Also, I'm a great researcher. So I was just, like bingo, bango, bongo. I could do this in my sleep. Loved it. Never wrote creatively. Never wanted to write creatively. Never tried to write creatively. Except I look back at, when I was like 6 and I used to write stories, and my aunt, she would go and I would apparently like tell my aunt stories, and she would write them down with pen before I could write, and then I would color in my stories. And so I started writing kids' books, but that's, no one's ever done that before, or like they're never been published. But I was like 6, and I was like, this is the story of the princess and the dragon. And then she would write down The Princess and the Dragon by Reese, Zahner, and I would draw it. She's like, this says the princess and the dragon. So she's like, you have to draw the princess and the dragon. So I draw it. But other than that was like the most creative writing I've done in my life. And then Mom died, and it's the only thing that made it feel better, is to write creatively. And it was not even writing creatively, it was just writing honestly to myself, for myself, with no thought that anyone would ever see it. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that, and it was really just, wonderfully freeing. And then I realized I could help people, so I started to release it. But I never intended to be a creative writer.
What did that look like? What was that moment like, or series of moments or era in your life where you made that realization that people could benefit from it? Did you share it with somebody that maybe, yeah, okay.
So the mentor, and I wrote something, what did I write? It was a poem that I wrote, and like, for example, I have 2 spoken word poetry albums that I've recorded that I don't know if they're ever going to come to light. They're just for me, with good poems. I'm really proud of them. I think that there's something about the fact of I like writing for me first. I think that I always write for me first, and then I write for the reader second. I edit for the reader, I write for me. And one of the things about writing for me is I'm allowed to be incredibly honest and transparent with myself. And it's how can I be as honest and with myself as possible. And I wrote this story, I got really mad about this idea that there was a guy that I dated. I won't even say dated is the right word. And he took a lot of, he fed me alcohol and he took advantage of me. And when I was in college. And I got really upset about this idea. And I used a poem to express it, but by proxy. So I put it in, because I realized it's not a situation that's unique to me. But I realized that there's a lot of things where, and I was told that it's just something that happens in college. And I got really, by someone I trusted, I said, this has happened. She goes, that's just something that happens in college. So I never did anything with it. And I thought about it for a long time of like, what has happened? And I realized that it's not something unique to me. It happens to a lot of women. And maybe they got told the same message that I did, which is, it just happens in college. Yeah. And it made me mad. And I think that there's something about writing from emotion. And so I wrote as a proxy this poem of someone else who's dealing with this thing from a guy, like an older guy who's taking advantage and does something similar. And by doing that, it allowed me to reclaim my own story by allowing me to really go through and say, I have empathy for this other person that I've written. I have empathy for myself, and it wasn't my fault. And I think that there's something to do with writing about how it allows oneself to rewrite sometimes like your own story, which can be incredibly powerful by either writing a memoir or writing for yourself and just being able to put your words out there and read them and say, I did that and it means something to me. And sharing it or not sharing it is regardless, because it changed the way that you see something, changed the way yourself, allowed you to rewrite your story. And because of that, you're able to process something that maybe you weren't able to process before. Like I wasn't able to process like this thing that had happened. But by writing about it happening to another person, it allowed me to feel empathy and sympathy for that person, which allowed me to feel empathy and sympathy to myself for the first time, and allowed me to come to a conclusion that I was able to process it. And I was not allowing it to be a victim to it, or I was allowing myself not realize that I was a person that was a participant. I was a victim. And that allowed me to really be able to reframe my own thoughts about that whole situation and to speak about it to other women who probably had done something similar or had something similar happen to them. So I think that that's kind of why writing is important. And to answer your initial question, I never wrote creatively, but now I can't imagine not writing creatively, because it is something that has become a lifeline for me. And it's also allowed me to better understand myself. And through that has allowed me to connect to others and have empathy for everyone, just general empathy to other people.
What do you consider your superpower?
Ooh.
I mean, you've talked about creative writing, empathy you can have for others, sympathy you can have for others, the humanity you can see in others. But if there's one thing that you would point to as your superpower, what do you think it is?
Empathy. Empathy. Not sympathy. Because empathy allows me to also sit by someone. Mm-hmm. It could be myself. Yep. I sit with myself and I have empathy for what I've gone through. I sit with others and have empathy for what they're going through. I think empathy is a huge superpower. It's so important. And it allows me to connect to other people. I also think I'm gonna give, I know you gave me one, I'm gonna give two, because I thought about this one. I'm just gonna take it. Vulnerability. I think being vulnerable is a superpower. I think there's like, for example, my mother, I misunderstood her growing up because I thought she was weak. And a lot of people thought she was weak because she was soft-spoken, she was a peacekeeper, and she was kind. And these are things that people usually see as weaknesses. She was not the definition of strength. She wasn't outgoing, gregarious. She wasn't strong in the way that you would see people as being strong. She was very soft-spoken, very into harmony, a peacekeeper, and she was kind. And I think my mother was incredibly strong looking back on it, but that's not the perspective that I had growing up. I thought she was weak because my definition of strength was, I think, the traditional definition of strength.
Yeah. Outspoken, gregarious, extrovert, loud, controlling, or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the soft things are strengths, I think, potentially more than I think everything has its place.
Yeah.
But the softness of a person is a huge strength, because it takes, like, as I said, like the third book is it, the question is, which is what kind of going into this soft is it along the lines of, like, is it a strength or is it stupidity to be kind in a cruel world? I think I know where I stand. I think it is a strength to be kind in a cruel world. I think it takes a lot of courage to be kind in a cruel world.
Mm-hmm.
I have to explore it more, but I think I know where I stand.
Yeah.
But I think that my strengths that I'm saying here are not ones that are typically seen as strengths. Vulnerability and empathy are not your super strong strengths of, like, oh, I'm going to go out and save the world. It's very much more subtle than that. But I think that without empathy and without vulnerability, we don't have connection. We have nothing.
Absolutely. Hey, I know where you're coming from. I know what you mean by that. In terms of, it's not and I leave it open. It doesn't have to be the traditional attributes or anything like that. So I like just to hear how people put it in their own words. So I appreciate that, especially empathy, especially vulnerability. I think we need that more than ever. Reese, what does leadership mean to you?
It means being able to take the first step and being vulnerable, and to see people as part of humanity rather as someone who's cogs in a machine. Seeing people as people. I think leadership is seeing people as people. I think it's being able to not take away the person from the task or from the job or from anything. It's being able to be people first. And that means having empathy, going back to it, towards people. I think leadership is leading with empathy. I think it's leading with a people first approach, but really that's meaning someone's, and being able to come at it from that perspective of, this is a person I'm talking to. This isn't my employee. This isn't my coworker. This is a person that's as equally rich and full as I am. That's just different, and I need to be able to treat them as such, and having that compassion, but also that respect from a person-to-person perspective.
Reese, at this point in the series, in the episode, we typically jump into the book. We dove into the book right away, covered so much about it, but is there anything else you want to share about the book at this point? Anything that you might not have covered that you want to share?
I hope it means something to someone. It means something to me. I hope it makes people feel not so alone in an isolating experience.
Yeah. And Reese, we talked about how your mom's passing had shifted who you are as a person, how you see humanity, the way you view empathy, the importance of humanity, all of that. Specifically in the book coming out, and I mean, we've spoken so much around the book, what people have taken away from it, but just to kind of point the question at you directly, how has the book coming out changed you? It may be in the words you've already shared, in the stories you've already shared, but I just want to make sure that part is covered, how the book itself, the book coming out, people reading the book, how it's maybe evolved your thinking on, because authors go into a book thinking they have an idea, they're writing it, and the idea is evolving, so they think they have it nailed by the time it's out the door. but then something happens where maybe they view the topic differently, maybe in reaction to what the people's reaction to the book. But has the book changed anything in you?
It's changed the way that I see myself. I never saw myself as a writer. I didn't know if I was a good writer. I just tried to write things that I thought were nice. Not nice, but I was proud of, and that were honest. I think when regarding the book, I'm talking about the memoir here, it allowed me to have so much compassion towards myself. Because a lot of it, particularly the pieces taken in grief, were taken from grief. I mean, I wrote those were the poems that I wrote when I was in grief, and I put them in the book. They're completely raw, they're honest, they are what I was writing when I was in grief. And I have so much compassion for myself that I went through something like that. I think also it allows me to see myself as someone who is strong because of the soft. Like we talked about, the vulnerability and the empathy. It's made me more empathetic towards others. It's made me more, by being vulnerable, it's connected me to other people. It has changed the way that I view humanity as being more connected than disparate. And it also allows me to have wonderful conversations like this one that teach me about myself, that teach me about others, that reinforce and make me love humanity even more, and make me not feel so alone in my experience as a human. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful for the opportunities it's brought to have wonderful conversations that are so enriching, and that maybe are enriching to others. Once again, I can't control that, but it's definitely enriching to my life. And that's how the book has kind of changed me, is it's just made my life more full of colors.
Love it. And then this is a loaded question, but what book has inspired or made the most impact on you?
It's going to be a weird question. Or it's going to be a weird answer, but I'm going to do it because it's the first thing that popped in mind. Anne of Green Gables. I freaking love Anne of Green Gables. Why? Because she's herself. This girl is so herself. And it is inspiring to see someone be so full of themselves and to take up space. And I, growing up, felt like such an outsider. I wish I had read Anne of Green Gables when I was a kid. I read it recently. And she's inspiring to so many people, I think, because, especially with someone with ADHD, a kid with ADHD, I was told to be quiet a lot, to sit down, to not take up space. You're doing too much. You are too much. I cannot tell you, my biggest thing was, you're too much. Well, Anne of Green Gables is too much. And guess what? She does it anyway. She takes up her space. She says her bit. We love her for it. She looks at life, and it makes me happy the way that she looks at life. And she's like, and so inspiring to me in the fact that she says her mind. It gets her into trouble sometimes, which is what my mind does. But she takes up space, and she's fully herself. I'll be damned. And I just freaking love her. I love Anne of Green Gables because I see so much of me inside of her. And she is like the person I wish that I was when I was a kid. And I freaking love that book. I love it. Whenever my soul is sick, whenever my body is sick, I watch The Princess Bride. And whenever my soul is sick, I read Anne of Green Gables.
I like that. Reese, wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything you want to share? Any other information you want to put out there that maybe I didn't ask about, that we didn't get around to? Anything at all? The floor is yours.
I'm just writing a novel. Lord have mercy. But I love writing my novel. It's my first ever novel. I feel like it's the blind leading the blind. I am the blind in both of these situations. But I'm having a great time. I like my sentences. I like writing good sentences. I've written some good sentences I'm very proud of. And I'm just doing my best. Which, I have to give a lot of grace to myself, because sometimes my best looks different on different days. But I'm just doing my best, writing my book, talking to my grandma who's 95. She's helping me write the book.
God
She's
bless
editing
her.
it. She's editing my book. Talk to her every day. And I say, and she goes, oh, Lord, she goes, Reese, you have to write this book. And I said, why, ma'am? And she says, because I'm going to die soon and I want to know what happens next. So there's like a lot of pressure to write this freaking book, right? Grandma's putting on the pressure here. She's, talk about this is, basically like the version of a cold diamond situation. I'm a diamond being like put with the amount of pressure that I'm a piece of coal. Grandma's making me into a diamond with the amount of pressure she's putting on.
It's taken too long to come out. Yep.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know what's happened. You've written the first half. I need this because I've written the first half. She goes, I need the second half. And she's like, I talk to her every day. And she goes, where's the book at? And I'm like, Grandma, I'm trying, Grandma.
Yeah.
She goes, I'm taking my staying alive pills and I need to, I don't know how many of those. And I'm like, Grandma. Anyway, so I'm writing the book for Grandma and for myself, but mainly for Grandma. And that's kind of my day. Doing my best, taking up space, writing my book for Grandma. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I love when people respond, I'm doing my best. I've taken to using that because, that's all you really can do. It's kind of between I'm in control, I'm not losing it, and I'm being vulnerable. I'm doing my best. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and your best looks different on different days,
Absolutely.
But I'm doing my best. I'm just doing, I say that with like the biggest sigh in the world, but,
Yeah.
It's exhausting sometimes, but I am doing my best.
It's honest. And again, in this episode, we covered Reese's own book under a pen name, Cleo Childs. The book is Moving With. It'll be out next year, April 2026. Thank you, Reese, for sitting down with me.
Oh my gosh, I've had a great time.
It's always a good conversation with you. We head in different directions. We go down different roads and different tangents, so I'm very appreciative. And if there's anything that I might have missed, there's so much to cover, limited time, something that you want me to ask that maybe I shouldn't have, I can reach out to Reese for additional insight, guidance, knowledge, all of it. Let me know, and I'll reach out to her. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening and subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.